Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Vamily Show, the very awesome family show, season 2, episode 14. And today with me, I have Miss Christian Family. And I gotta say, I was looking over your stuff, and you posted one earlier this year where you were. I think it was part 2. I don't know. I don't know if there was a part 1. I tried to see if there was, but it was about calamity. And you were talking about this gives you a chance to follow your passions and your dreams. Because even
Yes.
though you were a lawyer and owned your own law firm and all that kind of stuff, your passion has been speaking. And
Mm-hmm.
I listened to you speak at the TEDx
Excellent.
thing as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to know both how, because I kind of tried to ask people that have started their own businesses and stuff like that about stuff, maybe stuff they make or whatever that they're passionate about, and ask them even if it fails, is it worth going after it, just so that you don't have the regret of not trying it. So would you say even giving up making the money of doing attorney stuff is worth it right now, just because it fulfills you more than that kind of stuff could?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much for this question. Right. So let's see. So it starts with I graduated law school back in 2001. Right. And at that
That's when I
time,
graduated high school too.
is
So
right. See, so now I'm a real grown up kid. Right. So,
right.
um, and at that point, I had found like family law as like my area, and I was like, oh yeah, this here's where I can really make a difference in the world. This is really my calling. This is really what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And as early as 2005 up until 2020, right, I had my own law firm. And for the last 5 years, I mean, it was really growing. Like I had like 7 employees, only 3 of them were full time, but you know what I mean? Part time, right? So like it was really growing, but it stopped being my passion. It stopped being my passion because doing divorce, the more I talk to people, the more I help people, the more I realize that the legal part of the divorce was really just a small part of the whole conversation. And I was so frustrated with the whole divorce system, the way people talk about it, the way people think about it, the way it is down at the courthouse. Because if you've never been divorced, don't do it. Like this,
Right.
it was really bad. And I was like, this is stopping me from even loving the stuff that I do love. And so what that I have this kind of prestige, and really what a lot of people pointed out is I'd invested so much money into the law firm.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, I had the chance to do that TED Talk, right? And when I was on the
Right.
stage doing that and in front of the people, it was like, oh, yeah, I do have passion again. And the only
Right.
way to really follow it and do it was best for me, right, was to walk away from everything I'd ever known. And so, yeah. And so the question really for me isn't what did I risk by leaving? It's what would I have risked by staying?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That happiness that you feel inside, and it makes you almost a little angry at your past self for not trying to do it sooner. Um,
Right.
and how does it feel? I mean, as an attorney there in court, you're doing public speaking, but how does it feel doing the public speaking when you're the center of attention the whole time, like doing the TEDx talk? Like,
Mhm.
did they contact you to talk about what you have experience with when that came up?
Oh, well, no. So, two things are I find that making the arguments at court, at least when I was still a young lawyer and it was early, it was fun. I really enjoyed it because I like the way lawyers think and they put the ideas together. And it really was fun. It actually was fun until it wasn't anymore. And then finding an actual audience who their investment in listening to me was just to learn. You know what I mean? It was really just an open. I wasn't trying to convince them or anything, or you know what I mean, get them to believe things my way. I was really just sharing and being with the people.
Mhm.
I like that so much more. It was a lot more powerful. But no, I sought out the TEDx people. They let me see. Okay, I can't. The year doesn't matter. But anyway, I met a young woman at church, right? About 7 years ago, actually. And she had said to me, ooh, you should do a TED talk. And I was like, what are those? And she was
Mhm.
like, oh my God, you never heard of TED Talks? I was like, no, what is this? So she kind of hit me on to the idea. And so then I was on some kind of, I guess, a mailing list. Like you can get on the mailing list. And so when your
Mhm.
local TEDs are having something, they let you know. For 7 years, I've been getting emails going, yep, and saving it. I'm gonna apply. Yep, I'm gonna apply. 7 years. And then finally, the last round, I got it and I was like, no, yes, this time. Not next time. Yes, this time. And they had an open call, which was pretty cool because usually you send in like a video, like a 30-second video, and just like a little blurb about what your idea, darn lash, you see that? What
Yeah.
your idea is worth doing. And but this time they had a live audition. And so I went and there was like the first 25 people there would get to actually audition live. I was maybe number 13. Like it was really exciting. And I watched the other people audition in front of me, and some of them were funny and some of them had really cool, like just, cool, interesting ideas. And I did mine because divorce is my topic. And
Mhm.
I don't know if it's just me, but there's often a voice in my head that's kind of a naysayer that's like, don't talk about that. Nobody wants to hear that. That's stupid. You know what I mean? Come up with something else, So
Yeah.
like the voices in my head going, nah, nobody wants to hear that. Nah, but
Yeah.
I was like, no, this is my story. So I stand up and I just kind of do my opening about I'm a twice divorced adult, child of divorce lawyer, and the way that the audience there really interacted with me, I was like, no, this is the right thing, right? It's the right thing to be saying at the right time to the right people.
Mhm.
And that's the perfect storm.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. If you can, and how did it feel doing that in front of the audience as opposed to because you've done it on camera,
Mm-hmm.
or for your YouTube channel? How does the energy feel when you do it there in person?
In person is really my power. I think that's part of why I was telling you before we started. I did this radio program yesterday, which I'll be doing regularly, but not having anybody to bounce off of, right? There was nobody to be talking to. There was no laugh track.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need the energy of other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a little bit. It helps just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of put it to one of the musicians I had on there is it's kind of like a duet. Like that's how I view an interview. You gotta, if you want it to work well, you gotta have that ability to have a duet with another person and have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to say that it was kind of cool because I didn't look at your YouTube channel till last, but watching because some of your other videos, you recorded them a different way. But I could tell when you started recording them on your own because you did the same thing that a lot of us do, and you had the phone turned the one way and you had the bars on the
Yeah.
side, and I was like, oh, this is when she started doing it herself. And so I started watching those videos, and it was really awesome to see you start sharing your insights like right then and there about different topics. What inspired you to finally start doing that yourself and just putting your videos out there?
Oh, well, oh, thanks for that. So a couple of years ago, back in August of 2018, I started really heavy into transformation. So I'm really active with the Next Level Training Center here is in Columbus, Ohio. There's centers all over the country, right? Like there's Owl True in New York, there's the Gratitudes in Florida, right? But this is my transformation center. And so I started with them. And so I went through like the first 3 parts of the training, and that really just kind of is opening me up, you know what I mean, to the fact that I had been hiding out. I've been not really being my authentic self. I've been playing small. That's when I learned that I was really trapped in an abusive marriage. Like a lot, kind of happened there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been building this, this new community and getting in touch with myself. And then I went through kind of an intense 6 months training called Facilitator and Transformation. And it was there that I was finally really breaking through a lot of my limiting beliefs about doing everything right, doing everything perfect, looking an exact certain way, being all prepared. It's just like, dude, you got something to say. Just freaking turn on the camera and say it,
Yeah.
And so like, it was a big breakthrough because there was a time when like, if I had like a pimple, I took this one video in particular because I had this pimple on my cheek. Because there was a time when it would have been like, oh, you can't, not with a pimple, and like I've done it with my hair looking all crazy, so much so till I had a girlfriend. She was like, listen, I know you're feeling free, but don't you get back on camera with your But your hair, you look crazy. It's like, well, it's the point, right? Like what I'm saying is more important than what I look like. And it's more important than it being perfect and being polished. And it's just what I'm saying is what's more important. And thanks for that. Because I feel like you kind of saw some authenticity when I just went for it.
Yeah. And I've told people like the more stuff I shared like that, it's been more therapeutic than any therapy I've done, because a lot of the stuff that you've had happen or whatever, you feel shame with that. Well, if you put it out there for the whole world to see literally on a video, it kind of makes you don't even really think about it anymore. I don't know if that kind of happened for you with the stuff that you shared on there.
Yes. And along that line, so with this whole emotional intelligence transformation training, right? I've been getting in touch with my feelings and stuff like that. And so what was happening is some days I would wake up sad. I don't know if it's just me, but I know this is the thing that happens, and I'd be so busy being in resistance to being sad, you're not going to be sad, or I'm just trying to pretend like it wasn't happening, that it's taken all this energy and it's not happening. I'm just being in resistance to it.
Yeah.
What I learned is that if I wake up and I go, feeling kind of depressed today, it doesn't take all the energy. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, she acknowledged it. Then I get out of the bed and and then things turn out okay. It's just something about, right, not keeping it a secret, not pretending like it's not happening, not trying to stuff it or make it what it's not. Just letting it be.
Yeah, that's what that old rock band said, the Beatles.
Let it be.
Listen to that song. Just turn on that song anytime you have something happen, and you'll be like, I feel all right.
Just right.
And I was listening to some of your stuff, so I kind of wanted to know. My parents got divorced when I was younger, and I've been through a divorce myself. How when you look at it now, and especially now that you're being a speaker, for me anyway, I'm kind of thankful that stuff happened because I'm able to share it and help people out. Have you kind of turned that corner now, looking at all the stuff that happened in the past and being thankful almost that it happened so you could help other people out?
Yes, listen, absolutely. And so what's an interesting thing is, right, so my parents did divorce when I was like 7, right? That's my story. They're the ones that introduced me to divorce. And that was the reason, like a lot of people have a stigma, right, around divorce. They don't want to do it. That's what I say to people. That's the only thing you really know about divorce is you want to avoid it, right? That is the whole message, right? Don't do it. And so that was kind of my attitude about divorce from my parents having been divorced. The gift, though, was the fact that they co-parented really well. And this was before, so this is the 70s, the early 80s, before people were talking about co-parenting and shared parenting and, joint custody. And this is when mom had custody, dad got them on the weekends, right? This was that kind of time. But they did it so well, so seamlessly. My dad had me really all the time, like almost most of the weekends, he says, which is funny because I remember once my mother saying, as a kid, I don't really remember you cramping my style. Like I felt like I was able to do what I wanted to do. And I was like, yeah, because I was with my dad on the weekends.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do with you. I work all week and then I just go with my friends on the weekends leaving your dad. That sounds like a pretty good deal if you have that work out.
Exactly. I'm glad you understood, right? So that was pretty cool. My dad always paid child support. Like he was a millwright. He worked at the steel mill. So the child support always came out of the check. It was never a question. And he always thought, well, I'm glad it comes out off the top because at least then I don't miss it, and both of my parents live with me now after having been divorced for 36 years, comedy all over the place. But my mother says she's able to do it because there's no animosity against my father. Because why could she? He was a good dad.
Right.
He was a good dad. He did for me what he was supposed to do for me. And like, she didn't want to be married to him. Right? But as far as father goes, he did that good. And he says the same thing about her. Like he knew that I was in good hands, that my mom took good care of me. She never acted funny about keeping me from him. There's no reason to have any animosity. And so now they're able to live together almost like brother and sister. It's cute. Really, they bicker, really, it's like brother and sister. That's probably the best way to describe it. Right. Now, I did learn, so that's the positive ending, right? But because originally all I knew is that I didn't want to be divorced. When I ended up in my first marriage, the whole vision was about not being divorced. It
Mm.
wasn't about being in a healthy marriage. It wasn't about being happy in a marriage. It wasn't about marriage at all, if that makes any sense. It was all about not being divorced. Because at that point, my mom had been divorced twice. My dad had been divorced 3 times. Like, I mean, we're the divorcing kind, right? Now it's like, not
Right.
me,
Right.
not me. And it gave me a chance. So then my divorces themselves, this is more to the story. Then my divorces themselves gave me a chance to see where I was being narrow-minded, where I was being judgmental, where I was being even closed-minded. There were things that I just didn't understand. And so I am thankful that I say that it happened kind of in the order, that it happened. My parents' divorce was painful. It got me into a bad marriage. No, I won't say got, but it kept me in a bad marriage.
Mm.
Led me into therapy, which is where I realized that, wait, the reason all this did happen was based because of the person I became at around 7 years old when my parents divorced. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I think it definitely takes, like how you're saying, getting into the future a little bit on it
Mm.
and looking back to see, oh, I see how this was building. And now I have just like, a pretty solid, complete, well-rounded view of divorce,
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And I was listening to your story, and the when you change your name for one reason, and I was listening to the story of that, and by the end of it, it made me realize it also was kind of the moment your life changed and you decided to go on a different path. And
Yes.
if you want to share that with everybody, because we have a few people in here. We've got Bible, Family Adventure, Bob, Joe, and Raptor,
Sure.
Evergreen Homestead, Truba Geo, John and Mandy RVing,
All right.
um, Linda R, and Arizona Insider. Yeah, if you want to share that story, because that one was kind of powerful and makes you kind of realize um, that God kind of has a higher plan for you, and even if you want to make different plans, it kind of shows up in your face at some point where you got to make a turn.
Perfect. Excellent. So, yeah, the name change story, hands down, one of my favorite stories. Because people say, Christian Family, is that really your name? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is my name. I chose it, right? So it starts back in May of 2018. I was at a workshop because I was a member of a group called How to Manage a Small Law Firm. And it was about how to manage a small law firm. Ha, ha, ha. Right. And so I was at a workshop that they put on about how to open a second law firm. Because at the time I was thinking of adding to my family law firm, maybe a title agency or like a real estate wing, and start make money that other way. On the way to the workshop, I had fired my associate because I signed up for the workshop months before, right? So on the way to the workshop, I fired the associate. While I was at the workshop, my paralegal quit. And so now it's just me and the legal assistant.
Wow.
It was rough, right? Like, how did it go from me plus three to me? And then the legal assistant quit when I got back home, but that's on the side. So,
That
so I'm in the
was like
workshop.
the icing on the cake after all that. You're like,
After
of
all,
course she did. Probably that's what you thought too. Of course she did. That when it happened.
right. I know they were like rats jumping off a sinking ship. This thing is going down. So they got out. So the guy who runs the workshop, his name's Arjan. He's like, clearly you're not in a position to open a second law firm because
Right.
your first one isn't working.
Right.
Maybe you should kind of close it down or burn it to the ground, was actually his language, and build a new law firm. So your second law firm is really your first law firm, done right. And I was like, this makes sense, so I'm coming up with this new thing. And at the time, the name of the law firm was the Manning Law Company. And it was kind of a subtitle, Christian Divorce Attorneys, because Christian divorce really is my angle, right? And that, Christians don't have to stay married, this whole thing. And so he's like, well, what's with this Manning Law Company? Anyway, like how can people know what you do? Aren't you Christian divorce law or Christian family law? I said, yeah, I am Christian family law. But in the state of Ohio, they don't allow trade names on a law firm. So the only way my law firm could be Christian family law is if I changed my name to Christian family. And so the idea was born there. And it was a little tongue in cheek, but we made me a little name tag and said Christian family and we giggled.
Right.
But then I started thinking about it and I thought, why not? Right? That's a pretty bold branding move. I'm bold, right? Like, let's do it. So I called my husband, and I'm like, hey, listen, how would you feel if I were to change my name? And he was like, well, if it would make you $1 million, I get behind it. And I was like, you know what? It could, this is the kind of thing that could get that kind of notoriety. Doggone it, let's do it. So I'm changing the name.
And I
So
like
again,
the husband, by the way. The was husband.
exactly.
How do you do that into the wife? Because the wife that doesn't.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
that doesn't work out.
It doesn't work as well.
Not as cool. It's not as cool as husband.
Right? Oh, thanks for that. So I was like, cool, go ahead for it. So I complete the application for the name change hearing. It goes through the process, and the date scheduled is August the 2nd of 2018. And I thought, cool, how cool is this? Because earlier in the year, I had signed up for the next level trainings, emotional intelligence leadership training. And it was the weekend of August 3rd, 4th, and the 5th. The 5th, incidentally, was my birthday, which is why I had chose that weekend for the workshop. And I was like, how cool is that? And it's a kind of workshop, it's an in-person training where you wear a name tag the whole time. And so it gave me the opportunity to say, well, what nickname do you want on the name tag? And I was like, Christian, right? Because my name's going to be Christian by the time I get into this workshop.
Right.
What I didn't know was that on August the 1st, the day before my name change hearing, the husband and I would get into the worst fight ever, and he would punch me in the face. So I then go into the name change hearing with a black eye. And I make it into the leadership training with a black eye. Now, I had signed up for the leadership training because I couldn't figure out exactly why my business wasn't growing as fast as I thought it should grow, right? That's what was leading me to all these workshops. How can I make this business grow faster? I have a message, which is pretty clear, that Christian women don't have to stay in these bad marriages. Like, this is a niche group. Why aren't I growing? So while in the workshop, there's a sign on the wall the whole time that says, what are you pretending not to know? Was pretending not to know that I was an abused woman, that I was a Christian woman trapped in a bad marriage, when my message was, that's not what you have to do. And so my business wasn't growing because I wasn't living the message. And it was like scales, you know what I mean? Really fell off of my eyes. And Christian Vamily really was born in that moment. And so it's just like, right, who knew? God knew for those things to line up just the way they did. And so I really feel like I started a new life.
Mm. And I take from that, because a lot of people I talk to, and it happened in that story too, was one person saying something to you, which might have been a little offhanded comment, and he might have thought, like you were saying, thought about it as like a joke at first, right? And it changed the trajectory of your life. It makes you kind of realize, when Jesus, talked about how you treat others and all that kind of stuff. If you look at examples in your own life, other people's life, you can see it right there. And I was thinking another from the Bible that changed their name was Simon and Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's another one. Other ones from there. And yeah, it was a really really powerful story that you have, and that you shared with people. And I kind of want to know from your divorce lawyer days, kind of as lightened up a little bit, but what was there some memorable couples that came in that both of them, you're like, you guys are this petty that you're fighting over, like basically almost like a stamp collection where you almost want to tear each stamp in half just so that it's literally divided in half?
I have two pretty memorable stories. One, actually, this one really, it was almost kind of sad, right? So the marriage, I want to say, was at least 20 years long. So it was a long marriage. And they had a really beautiful home in a nice suburb in Ohio. They never had any children, which was really sad to her, the wife, because she'd always wanted children. And apparently even inside the house, there was a room at one point that was supposed to be the nursery, but it never happened. But even though the outside of the house looked beautiful, what I learned was her dirty secret is that her husband was a hoarder, like a really awful hoarder, like the stuff on TV, right? So he's always ordering things, and that there were a lot of animals in the house. So even if there were things in the house of value, almost everything had an odor of it, of kind of cat urine,
Mm.
So in theory, there's all this stuff, but there's not really anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so really all she wanted was to just walk away. He had always been the primary earner, he had the retire, all this, everything. She was like, just let me get out of here. She didn't have any income. She was a cancer survivor. And she's the one that taught me about chemo brain, which I didn't really know about. And so even though she had, you know, um, survived, and I want to say she was maybe even 5 years out, which is like the window. She
Mm-hmm.
said her brain was just not really the same. She didn't really trust the way that she thought. You know what I mean? It was hard for her to learn new stuff. And so while wasn't on disability, she just wasn't confident in getting a job and doing that kind of thing.
Right.
We weren't even hardcore asking for spousal support. It was just kind of like, let me out of here. I can't afford these bills you have. I don't want any of that stuff in the house, and he had run up all this debt. That was the rest of it, right? Buying the stuff. Just let me out. When she had moved out, she did take some of the decor from the front entryway of the house, because that was stuff that she really liked. It was like a plant holder, like, you know what I mean? Like an umbrella stand. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what you're saying, when it's all said and done, he wanted to fight for her to be responsible for half of the debt with what? She has no income. And he wanted to get some of the stuff back, the decor that she had taken out of the entryway. I'm like, that's all she freaking wanted. This little bit of decor. This is it. This is it. And he wanted to fight about those things because that was the picture that he wanted and that kind of thing. And so, okay. And the message there, and I try to explain it to people, which is sometimes why you don't want to rush into the legal process of divorce, is a person who's doing that doesn't want to be divorced. And they don't necessarily understand what their feelings are and what their motivation is. What they do know is that I'm going to stay, this is the way that I can stay in this, is to be fighting over this and to be doing this kind of thing, So
yeah,
that was one. Another story that I think is so memorable. So this was a young couple, like they'd only been married for, I don't know, I'm going to say it was less than 5 years, maybe 3 years. She had a young baby, but she had found out that the husband had cheated, right? So he'd had some kind of an affair. And real talk, a lot of marriages recover from infidelity. A lot of marriages do. It does not have to be a death sentence to a marriage. People repent, people change, people forgive. A lot of marriages have recovered from infidelity, right? And a lot of marriages haven't, So she finds out he's cheating. And so she's really mostly angry about that. You know what I mean? And it's all deep in it and looking at the credit card receipts, like the stuff on TV, And it was going to be an agreed divorce for all intents and purposes, where he wasn't going to fight her. He's just going to sign off on the paperwork. And he came into the office with her, right, to sign the paperwork. And I saw how they interacted together. And I was like, they're really still in love. I don't think this divorce is going to last very long. Because people do that too. Get divorced and get married again, And so that was the most memorable thing about them. I was like, I don't think this divorce is really going to work out. We'll go forward with it.
Oh man. Mm-hmm. Oh man. Yeah. Forever best friend has dealt with the hoarder situation before. Mm-hmm. It's not any good. And yeah, I got married young to my high school sweetheart and all that kind of stuff. But we were always cordial enough, and we went to a place where we had like a lawyer draw up the papers, but we just both agreed to everything and did it that way. Which apparently that probably doesn't happen very often most of the time when people get divorced, I'm sure.
It happens. It will happen more often. That's kind of one of my visions for the world. Mm-hmm. As more people listen to my message about divorce and how to handle it. In an ideal world, when marriages end, most of them really can be relatively peaceful, like how your and your wife's was. Where people go wrong is, in my experience, they start running into divorce right away. Okay. So let me tell you the right way to do it, and then we'll tell you why the other way is wrong, right? So here's how you save yourself thousands of dollars. Are you listening to me? Hours of your life. Here's how to handle it. So you determine that the marriage is over. What you want to do is separate physically. That's the first thing you want to do. Don't talk to a lawyer. Don't file any papers. Separate physically. And so what this does is it allows you to, one, really live out what a divorce is, because divorce means I don't want to live with you anymore.
Yep.
And you don't need anybody's permission to do that. It lets you know, how is this going to look financially, right? Because when you're married, all of your money supports one household. When you get a divorce, it's really the same amount of money, but now it has to support two households, right? So what does that look like? It gives you a chance to do that. It lets you divide up all of your personal property, all your goods and belongings. It lets you do that on your own without going to court. Now, I do say to people, if you're the one that's moving out, you better take everything you really want and that's important to you on the first go. You only get one bite at that apple, you know? Anything that is not in your possession when you leave, pretend like it burned up in a fire. Just make that decision in your mind.
Put it out of your mind.
Put it out of your mind. It's over, right? You can't have it. You should have took it when you first left.
Yeah.
Right? Because most divorce papers, it's easy to get it to say, and the courts will ultimately decide. You get to keep what's in your possession.
Right.
You know, that's generally how it works out, you know? And so if now I've lived separate and apart for you for a year, 2 years, because I say do it as long as you possibly can without getting a divorce, the less claim the person has to, you know what I mean? The less claim you have to anything, right? You're establishing a separate financial identity, right? So if we have credit cards together, I'm not using those. I've got my own bank accounts, you know, I'm getting my own car insurance, all this stuff that was one. And you don't have to go to court to do any of this. You don't need anybody's permission for this. You don't need a lawyer's help for this. You don't have to spend any money to do this stuff. You just do it. And so now I'm living apart from my spouse. I've got my own financial identity. If we had kids, now we kind of know what it's like to co-parent from two different households. Yep. Oh, okay. Well, you know what? The kids like going over there for a week and over here for a week. That's just how we do it. That works for us. Maybe it's a situation like mine where the husband thought he wanted week on, week off.
Right.
I wouldn't have minded because I would have liked a little free time, you know.
Oh, my mom had to keep me for 5 days in a row in a week. I can have a whole week where I get to myself. All
exactly.
Right. I was like,
oh, take them. But that's not our situation, right? He's every other weekend, but he does take a midweek overnight, which is a gift and a blessing. Who knew? Just that one day a week really is it's a gift. It gives me a little bit of a break. So anyway, it gives you a chance to see what works. How is it actually, right? So now that I see how it is to co-parent separately, I see how it is that the money is divided up. I see, you know, how it is to do all these things. Now I can write that down, right? So now that's my divorce documents, my separation agreement, my shared parenting plan. It documents what I'm already doing. We're documenting what we're already doing. And now we just go forward with it. On the other hand, people are mad. They're ready for the divorce. The first thing they do is call a lawyer because that's the only thing you know. That's what you see on TV. Now you're filing papers, and now you're trying to make things a certain way, right? You're going to make a plan and then force your life to fit into it.
Yep.
That doesn't work. This causes a fight. Now we have different views on how it should look, but neither one of you freaking know. You don't know. You haven't done it. You don't know. You don't know. Right? So do it.
Right.
Do it, right? Live it. There's only 3 times, and this doesn't come up super often, but it does. I don't want to say that, but there's 3 situations I say where people need to get a divorce right away. And there's only 3. Otherwise, I say stay married as long as you can, even if you're living separate and apart. You know what I'm saying? But not legally get divorced until you have to. Don't do it until you have to. You have to get a divorce if you want to marry somebody else, right? It's as simple as that. You cannot get into a new marriage until you're out of your old marriage.
Yeah.
So you have to get a divorce for that. You have to get a divorce if the spouse is keeping your child away from you. So sometimes, no matter what I say, all that goes out the window. because legally, and I don't want to say in all states, but I know for sure in Ohio and in a lot of states, married people can do whatever they want to do, if that makes any sense. So if I have my kid and I want to keep it away from my husband, I can, because the kid is 100% mine, just like it's 100% his. And he could do the
Wow.
same thing. He could take the kid and keep it away from me, because the kid's 100% his, just like it's 100% mine.
Wow.
And it's not a criminal thing because it's within a marriage, right? Like it's mine. I can do what I want to do with my stuff. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So you have to go to court and get the court involved if, something like that is happening. So that's the reason you would need to file a divorce right away. And the third reason is if you're a victim of some kind of abuse. Usually I'm talking about financial abuse, one way or the other. You have to have some of your spouse's money to be able to survive, and they refuse to give you anything. So you have to go to the court to stop that financial abuse, to have that person ordered to pay you child support or spousal support, or, alimony, something like that. Or the other way around. I've also had some cases where the one spouse, because that was my first marriage, the spouse actually, when he left me, he took credit cards that was still in my name. He was busy running up debt and stuff, and tax debt. He was running up a lot of debt in my name, which is another form of financial abuse. And the only way I was really able to get any recourse for that was to get the court, right, involved and stop that from happening. So outside of those things, though, separate and live apart before you enter into the legal process.
Right. And you were talking earlier about, a lot of times, and RV Weekends had a very peaceful divorce as well. Um, there's a lot of times that infidelity can be overcome. Would you say that beforehand, making sure both people are on the same financial page and with how many kids, or if they want kids wise, is probably two of the bigger sticking points to get down before you get married than necessarily worrying about infidelity. One of the things my dad left me with advice after he was gone through something my stepmom told me was he was like, I don't spend time worrying if somebody's going to cheat on me, because you can't control whether that's going to happen or not anyway. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So why spend time worrying about it?
Word. Look, I'm with that 100%. And yes, my message is that honesty, or really dishonesty, right, is the crack in the foundation of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's dishonesty about anything, money, right, your finances, and especially what your desires are and what's important to you. And that's where it comes in with the kids. I've had, off of just the top of my head, 3 stories that I can pull pretty fast, where the woman went into the marriage wanting kids, and she maybe wasn't sure about that to the spouse, that how important that was to her, or the spouse knew it, and wasn't honest about the fact that that's not also what they wanted. And that is a major breakdown in a relationship. And unfortunately, I've seen marriages last a long time before that really breaks it down. And so now, of those stories, all 3 of those women are past, oh, this makes me sad, are past childbearing age. By the time they finally, you know what I mean, were honest with themselves and accepted how dishonest their spouse was with them about having kids. And so they waited all this time and they wanted, and then it didn't happen. And so, yes, you have to be honest about what's important to you, and what's the deal breaker and what's not a deal breaker, so especially there. And then with finances, I say, so I've got this kind of story, which I'll tell you. We've got a few minutes, right? So when people become one, I say you become one in 5 different areas, right? So spiritually, you become one. And that's what people talk about, what God has put together, let no man tear asunder. You become one with God. And I believe in that, right? And that's your 2 hearts become one, and now you're one person. And so divorce really happens when one of the hearts becomes hard. Now there's no longer a union. So that's really divorce, right? Divorce, I believe, is when one spouse's heart gets hard against the other spouse, right? But you also become one physically. And that's not just sex, but sex too. But I talk about, you join households, right? You live in the same house, you got all this stuff together, right? So physically you're one. Financially, you become one, right? Like, because that's why you're a joint entity on taxes. You have joint mortgages on houses. You have joint checking and savings accounts, right? Things that you have to separate financially. You become one emotionally, and emotionally is like your families become one. You know what I mean? Like, there's all of these ties to it. And then you're also one legally, which is right, like you're legally married, and that means things. So you're
Yeah.
one in all of these areas. The only thing that the lawyer can really handle is separating the legal part. And the point in separating the legal part is to separate the financial part, really, right? To separate out your physical belongings, and emotionally to divvy up your kids. But it sees the kids at that point kind of like an asset, right? There's something you own.
Right.
So how are you going to split time with these kids,
Right.
So that's the really the point of the divorce. So anyway, that's my framework. So financially, sometimes people will come to me and I'll be like, okay, so you want to separate physically and you want to separate out your finances. And they say, oh, well, we never joined our finances. I say, oh, well, then you've always been preparing for divorce. Always. Because part of oneness is joining your finances. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean like every family does what works for them. I know a lot of
Mhm.
families where there's a joint pot for all family bills and that kind of stuff. And everybody has their own little side account. Cause I mean, you don't have to ask your spouse every time you want a milkshake, I mean, every time you want something
Right.
from Starbucks, but it's not about secret money.
Right.
And you know what I mean? And I don't know what you have and you don't know what I have. It's not like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I I look at um there's different people that I've talked to in the past, that have worked with different people, and I heard one of your stories where you're talking about doing legal aid work. So did
Mhm.
that kind of make you appreciate what you had when you were younger, um, like everything you had? Because I learned to appreciate when I got older and learned how much money my parents actually had compared to when you're younger, and realize how I'm more appreciative of what you had. So did that kind of have the same effect on you?
Mm. Yes, but less so about the financial aspect and more so about the emotional aspect.
Hmm.
It helped me to see what a gift and a blessing it is to have a family that loves you and supports you. Because the saddest thing with the women that I would help at Legal Aid was when they didn't have anybody else. So they were trapped in this abusive marriage, and they were really trapped because they feel like they didn't have anybody else. They didn't have friends that they could talk to. They didn't have a mom's house they could go to.
Right.
For them to leave the spouse, they were literally going to have to go to a homeless shelter, or you know what I mean? Or thank God they have these battered women shelters because they didn't have any other support.
Hmm.
And that was what really struck me because I know if I had to get away, if I had to go, I had somewhere to go. I
Right.
have friends and family that love me and would take me in and that could help me. And so that really made me realize, wow. And that's why it is that sometimes my mother used to use the phrase, two paychecks away from homeless, because a lot of people, and I know as a child, that's the truth for us. I mean, we were living paycheck to paycheck. That's how it is. And so what if she'd have gotten sick or if I'd have gotten sick
Yeah.
and then she had to leave work a little bit, I mean, we wouldn't have been able to make it on our own. But thank God I do know that we've got some family. Even if all they had was a couple bedrooms, they would have let us come and sleep on the couch. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. My grandparents, after my parents got divorced, that's where we stayed for a little while. I went with my dad after they got divorced, and all that. And I kind of want to know, um, that was probably for you one of the hardest parts of doing divorce was having to deal with children and custody. I'm sure you probably saw nasty tricks on both sides and just heartbreaking stories on both sides of that kind of stuff.
There is a lot of sadness out there. And some of the stuff that people do, I honestly wouldn't believe if I hadn't run into it personally. My main thing was to kind of be selective with the clients that I took, which is one thing, honestly. If you're the kind of person that's scorched earth and everything that you want is just to hurt the other person and you'll do it even with the kid, we're not a
Right.
good match. You know what I mean? I
Right.
don't want your money. You can't pay me enough money to be that person. My message is very clear, and I tell it to everybody as soon as they meet me, is that a child has the right to have the best relationship possible with both of their parents, whatever that looks like. Sometimes the best relationship possible really does mean equal time. I mean, there are parents that works for them. Like that's the thing that makes sense. For some parents, the best relationship possible really is kind of no contact at all because that parent is toxic, and it's better for the child to have a fantasy,
Mhm.
you know, about what that person could be like than to have them in
Yeah.
their life have a reality of a monster. But the child has the right to have the best relationship possible with both of the parents. And so I really would press that. And I press working together. The most important thing is the child, to make sure that the child is happy.
Mhm.
And I'd use this explanation from my childhood. It's one of my favorite stories. All my stories are my favorite, but this is my favorite story too. My grandmother would tell this one, my mom's mom, because same thing. When my mom first left my dad, we were back at my grandma's house. That's most
Right.
stories. That's how they go, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
how most story goes. So we were at my grandma's house, but I was still going to visit right with my dad on the weekends, and so sometimes my grandma would be the one to pick me up from my dad's house. And she'd always say, when I come pick you up, you'd be so happy. You'd be smiling and you would be all sticky and stinky, like you hadn't been bathed or anything all weekend. And I would ask you what you ate and you'd be like cheese and hot peppers, food. Um,
Right.
but she always just remembers how happy I was. She never said, my mom, there was never the conversation, you know what? You'll go back to your dad's house when he can figure out proper hygiene. We can figure out how to wash you up and you don't come out smelling and looking like you've been wearing the same clothes for 3 days.
Mhm.
We'll send you back when he can figure out how to feed you an actual meal, and not just cheese.
Right.
But they didn't, right? What they were focused on was the fact that I was happy. I was
Right.
happy. And why ruin that with anything else? And so that's a message I try to share with your moms and dads, right? When they're worried that the other parent doesn't know how to do it. And the other parent loves the kid just like you do.
Right.
You trust kids with a lot of people that may or may not. Trust
Right.
the child with the parent. You're not doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Trusting the kid with the parent. Maybe they'll come back sticky and stinky and haven't only eaten cheese for 2 days, but are they happy? That's what matters.
Yeah. That's what matters.
Mhm.
I gotta say, I took a lot from my dad because he never talked bad about my mom or anything like that. Never said anything bad about her. I've kind of taken that in my life. Like anybody that I haven't had a relationship work out with, I've never talked bad about them either. Like I'm like, it is what it is, and there's no reason to put another person down just because they're not with you anymore and it didn't work out.
With that.
Um, and your parents living with you, um, I want to say they sound like awesome parents and all that kind of stuff. But you decided to call your podcast
Asshole
"Asshole
parents.
Parents." So I'm sure there's a little bit of humorous stories that happen on that podcast. Is there
Yes.
one in particular that made you set this podcast off in the first place? The idea for it, was there something that happened? You're like, this is gonna be too good, and I gotta start sharing the stuff from the past.
Oh yeah. So the underlying premise is that my mom thinks my dad's an asshole, right? And it's like he'll do shit. He's such an asshole. And my dad thinks my mom's an asshole, right? And I realized from living with both of them that no, really, they're both assholes. And if they're both assholes, does that mean I'm an asshole, right? Is that what that means? You know what I mean? So it was a really interesting thought because usually when people think about asshole, it's always the other person.
Right.
Right. And so that was just kind of the premise, right? Because we're in the kitchen, just kind of, poop butting around like that kind of thing. And so there wasn't a title for the podcast when I first did the interviews. And so it wasn't until I had them both together in the interview that I came up with asshole parents. And so they say, and my dad goes, I don't really like this title. And my mother goes, yeah, it should be more like asshole dad, cool mom.
And you're like, that's the point right there.
Exactly, right, exactly. And so then I had my first interview was with a woman named Shayro Bottom. So she's my interview that wasn't my parents. And in it, she talked about kind of her parents being unconscious. And I thought, unconscious parents. I was like, that's, so if I want to, get picked up, because everybody won't pick up a podcast with profanity in the title. I was like, well, I can make it unconscious parents. So I say, Dad, what do you think of that? He was like, unconscious parents? Should I rather be an asshole? So, asshole parents it is.
Yes. Oh man.
Mm-hmm.
And forever best friend, they want to know if a child is conceived out of wedlock and both names are on the birth certificate, does one parent have more rights than the other parent?
It depends specifically on what state you're in. It is a state by state situation. So I can speak to Ohio because this is where I'm at. In Ohio, an unmarried mother has 100% custody of the child, and the father only has the rights that she gives to him. So if the mom feels like the dad's a full parent and he has as many rights as she does, then he does.
Mm-hmm.
But if she doesn't feel that way, then he needs to go to court and get the court to order him to have as many rights as she does. Now, arguably, when the dad does go to court and ask for his rights, they are treated as being on equal footing at that point. But he does have to go to court and ask for anything that the mom isn't particularly offering to him. In other states, I understand it may be a little different, but I don't know. So I still always say that parental rights are in the mind of the mother. That's always kind of been my thought on it. It's in the mind of the mother. How she treats the other parent is the rights they have.
Right. Mm-hmm. And when my parents got divorced, I was old enough. It was in Utah that I could make a choice of who I wanted to go live with too. So I'm sure that varies depending on the state of what age they are and on whether they can do that or not.
Yep. Some states, so like in Ohio, a child can never actually say where they want to go.
Wow.
Child never gets to make that decision. Here in the courts, the children speak through what's called a GAL or guardian ad litem. So the kids have their own lawyer in the divorce process. And so the kids speak through the lawyer. And so the lawyer's job is to speak for the child and to speak for the child's best interest. Because conceptually, some kids will want to stay with one parent that's less strict, not necessarily because that's what's good for them, just because the other parent's cooler. You know what I mean? I want to stay with my mom. She's fun. You know what I mean? Right? Dad's going to be all military drill over there, you know? I'd rather stay with my mom, And so the guardian ad litem is there to kind of explain that, right? That there's nothing wrong at dad's house. There's just a lot more, structure and stuff over there. It's just, that kind of thing.
Right. And F&A Vamily said that you had them rolling when you said everyone else is an asshole. So
right. That's how people. Never you. It's always them.
Right. She forever best friend she says she has a real world friend whose baby mama is now missing in action. He can't find his kid or the baby mama, and he's even applied to pay child support, but they can't find her.
No, that's hard because going the child support route is the smartest thing you can do. It's the smartest way to handle it. Because the Child Support Enforcement Agency is really designed historically to find missing parents, right? And match them together to make sure that the finances are going to the kid. So if the baby mama was getting any kind of government subsidy, Medicaid, care source, food stamps, a check, any of those things, she's in the system, and that should be a way to find her. The only thing I can imagine is if you really don't know which state she's in. I know that child support enforcement agencies, even though they're kind of federally funded on some level, and don't hold me to GAT, but I know there's like a federal thing to it.
Right.
They're state run. And so the states have to talk to each other. So if you're like trying to pay support in Georgia, but mom's really in the system in Virginia, then I imagine that wouldn't work. The only other thing, and this is really kind of borderline, but what can you do? If you have a sense on like where she is, so sometimes that she's in the same city with you. You just don't know where she's at, or you sense that she moved to the city where the child's where her mother lives or something. You know what I mean? You got a sense on where they are. There is a way to just try to find them, like private investigators and stuff like that. There are people who can track people down on Facebook and social media. And like, that's their whole thing. Because once you track down an address, you can take them to court. You can get them served. And that'll get you something, but you have to be able to contact them.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just say, I used to live with a private investigator. So let me just say this: if somebody wants to find you and they have the money, they can pay somebody to find you, and they'll find you, and you won't even know that they're trying to find you. So, that's and that's something you dealt with, I'm sure, as an attorney, having private investigators work with you and check everything out, and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure on some cases as well. And you're now, because you don't have the practice going anymore, because you really want to get into speaking. Is there any places you want to speak? Like, would you like to go back to some of the schools that you went to and speak on your life, how it went from college? Because I was thinking back to when I graduated and when you graduated, we probably thought the world was going to go one way, and then September 11th happened, like few months after we graduate. Like, we were starting school our senior year right about this time, 20 years ago. So it's kind of even look at what's happened today with this last 20 years. And so you're probably like me, like, I might as well go for it because the world is not going to work with any plans anyway.
No, that's so true, because that was COVID was the final nail in the coffin on that law firm. It was like, listen, right? If you're going to make a move, now is the time. No, the main place actually that I want to speak are at like conferences and like to corporations. That really is my thing. Because my meta message, I got a couple of messages, right? Really is to remove the stigma from divorce and also kind of then make the whole process better, streamline the system at court. People get involved in this contested custody litigation, this contested divorce litigation, and you can't think straight. Employers are losing money, because the people are, you know what I mean? It's not like you're missing court because, you know what I mean? You're missing work because you have to go back and forth to court. Even if you're at work, you're not really there, you know what I mean? Because your mind is someplace else. Anyone who's ever dealt with depression, there were those commercials that I love that was like, like depression hurts. Do you know what I mean? Like, it really is physically taking so much out of you.
Yeah.
And my message is it doesn't have to be that way. And so to kind of switch it so that divorce becomes a healthy and an empowering thing. It's my goal then to get us in front of as many big audiences, especially people who work, because I feel like they're kind of a captive audience, right? Listen, employer, you make everybody here that is married or has a kid, right? Kind of, right? Come to listen to me talk. And it'll help to kind of free them up on what they should do next and how they can handle things so that they can balance the load. Because, I mean, it is still going to hurt. Even if you're the one that wants to divorce, I mean, it still hurts. I mean, it's divorce,
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be debilitating. So, yeah, that's really my goal.
Yeah. And if you want to find out more, you can find her on Christian Family Esquire. She's on there. You can find her as ESQ, if you're wondering. And Asshole Parents, you can find probably if you search on any other platforms, you can find them there, Spotify.
Yeah, I'm on most of them. You have Spotify, I think iHeart, or maybe not iHeart, but I'm not on iTunes. I'm not big enough, but but yeah, you can find it. Asshole Parents, a Christian Family, and it's me doing like this. And then the website is divorcexn.com. I keep telling people it's a little janky yet, but it won't always be janky. It's going to be nice one, and you'll be able to go in there and see different, videos I've been on and different, shows I've been interviewed on.
Right, and you've been, you're probably just starting to learn how to do that as well. And so, that's one of the things that I realize sometimes you gotta grab it and get it out there and start doing it. And then if you don't like how you do it, at least you know what to tell the person that can do the pro job what you want, because of what you don't like about what you've done. So,
Right.
so
You got it.
yeah, thank you for being here. Stick with me for 1 minute. Everybody else, till next time, stop waiting for life to happen.